Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are jumping straight into Genesis chapter 41. This is where Joseph, who's been stuck in prison, gets pulled out to stand before Pharaoh.
Yeah, before the most powerful ruler in the world, basically. And it's all because of these two, well, frankly, terrifying dreams Pharaoh had.
In this deep dive, it's more than just looking at dream interpretation. We're really getting into crisis foresight, strategy, logistics on a massive scale.
That's right. Our sources, they really focus on Genesis 41, verses 25 through 36. And we're unpacking not just the warning God gives, but this incredibly detailed 7-year plan Joseph proposes, like right on the spot.
To save pretty much the whole region.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to get clarity on that warning, understand the nuts and bolts of the management plan, and also the sort of theological why. Why was this warning given not just to Pharaoh, but through Joseph?
It's a huge moment. You're going from a prison cell to essentially running a nation's emergency response. We want you to really grasp the scale of this.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. Joseph's been languishing in prison.
For 2 years. Forgotten, really, even though he correctly interpreted dreams for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker back in chapter 40.
Right, and now suddenly Pharaoh's the one having nightmares, and none of his experts can help.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just, Pharaoh having a bad night. Dreams in ancient Egypt were serious business.
High stakes. It wasn't just some fringe belief system.
Not at all. It was core to their religion and politics. They genuinely believed the gods used dreams to communicate vital information, warnings, commands, blessings, you name it.
And they had systems for it, didn't they? Like actual manuals.
They did. We have archaeological evidence, things like the papyrus Chester Beatty III. It dates back to maybe the 13th century BC, and it's basically a dream dictionary.
Right.
Yeah, it lists dream symbols and categorizes them good omen, bad omen, and tells you what they supposedly mean. They tried to make it a science.
So they had professional interpreters, guidebooks, the works.
Exactly, which makes the failure here even more dramatic. All of Pharaoh's experts, his priests, his wise men, the text mentions them in verses 8 and 24. They were completely stumped.
Total failure.
Yeah. And for Pharaoh, this isn't just inconvenient, it's a crisis of confidence in his entire religious and advisory system.
So the stage is set, the professionals have failed, and in walks Joseph, literally dragged out of a dungeon. The pressure must have been immense.
Unbelievable pressure. But Joseph, he immediately deflects. He doesn't claim any personal ability. He points straight to God.
He says the dream is one message.
Right. Yes. And crucially, our sources point out the Hebrew phrasing in verse 25 emphasizes not just that God revealed something, but the impending action of God. It's about what God is about to do.
Got it. So it's less, here's some information, and more, brace yourself, God is acting.
Precisely. It elevates it beyond just predicting, say, a climate cycle. This is divine intervention being announced.
And the two dreams, the 7 fat cows eaten by skinny cows, and the 7 good ears of grain swallowed by blighted ones, they mean the same thing.
Exactly the same thing. 7 years of incredible abundance, followed immediately by 7 years of absolutely devastating famine.
And Joseph doesn't pull any punches describing how bad the famine will be.
No, he really emphasizes the severity in verses 28 to 31. He says it will be so grievous that the good years will be completely forgotten, like they never happened. The famine will, quote, consume the land.
That phrase, consume the land, keeps coming up. Why the focus on the land itself, not just the impact on people?
Well, that ties into the bigger story in Genesis, doesn't it? Remember the curse back in Genesis 3? The ground itself is affected by sin and judgment.
Ah, right. Cursed is the ground because of you.
Exactly. So this famine isn't just about the Nile failing or lack of rain. It's portrayed as the land itself suffering, reflecting this ongoing brokenness. It shows God's sovereignty extends even over the land of Egypt, a place that thought it was immune because of the Nile.
That adds another layer entirely. Okay, so the message is dire. But why did God give the warning twice, in 2 different dreams? Verse 32 addresses this.
Yeah, the doubling isn't just for emphasis, though it certainly does that. It signals 2 key things, according to the text.
Okay.
1, certainty. This is absolutely locked in, established by God, no ambiguity. 2, immediacy. It's going to happen soon. God will shortly bring it to pass.
So it's definite and it's urgent. Time to act is now.
Right. Which leads seamlessly into maybe the most stunning part. Joseph doesn't just interpret. He immediately proposes a comprehensive solution, a national strategy.
He doesn't even wait to be asked, does he? He just launches into it.
Nope. Straight from interpretation to policy recommendation. His first move is political. Pharaoh needs to find a man who is discreet and wise and put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt.
That sounds like a massive role, like a prime minister or a vizier.
Pretty much, yeah. Someone with immense authority to oversee the entire operation. And think about the irony he's recommending, finding a wise man right after all of Pharaoh's established wise men just proved useless.
He's essentially saying, your team failed, you need a new position and someone competent to fill it. That's audacious.
Incredibly audacious for a prisoner. It shows that true wisdom isn't just knowing things, it's knowing what to do. This vizier figure would need the power to actually execute the plan nationwide.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of that plan, the preservation strategy. What does he advise?
He says Pharaoh needs to appoint officers across the land, their job. Verse 35. Gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Centralized storage, basically.
Store up the surplus during the good years. Makes sense. But then there's that confusing phrase in verse 34, take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt. What does that actually mean? Because the next verse says, gather all the food.
Ah, yes. This is a major point of discussion in the commentaries. That phrase, the fifth part, seems contradictory if the instruction is to gather all the surplus.
Right. Is it 1/5 or is it all of it?
Well, there are two main interpretations scholars wrestle with. The first, and probably the most common, is that it refers to a tax.
A 20% tax.
Exactly. A 20% levy on all agricultural output during the 7 good years. That collected grain becomes the national reserve, while the other 80% feeds the population during those abundant times.
Okay, that sounds plausible. But would 20% really be enough? We find out later this famine hits everywhere.
Yeah.
Egypt ends up feeding the whole region. Could they do that on just a 20% reserve built up over 7 years?
That's the big question, and it fuels the second interpretation. Some scholars think the fifth part might not be a quantity, but more of an organizational term.
Like an idiom.
Sort of, yeah. Maybe it meant dividing the collected grain into 5 sections for storage, or perhaps organizing the collection efforts across 5 administrative districts or major store cities, which we know existed in ancient Egypt.
So like a logistical framework rather than a strict percentage.
Exactly. That would fit better with verse 35 saying, gather all the food, meaning all the surplus beyond immediate needs, and then organize it using this fifth part structure.
Interesting. So whether it's a 20% tax or a 5-part organizational system, the objective is crystal clear.
Absolutely. Verse 36 repeats it. The food is for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, that the land perish not through the famine. It's about national survival, preventing the collapse of the land itself.
And this wasn't just an Egyptian problem, was it? The scale was bigger.
Much bigger. Verse 57 tells us the famine was severe in all lands. It affected the whole known world at the time, stretching across the ancient Near East, including Canaan.
Now that's unusual, isn't it? For Egypt, which relies on the Nile flooding, controlled by, well, their god Happy, and Canaan, which relies on rainfall, to both experience total failure at the same time.
Extremely rare. It suggests this wasn't just a typical regional drought. This was something synchronized, something orchestrated on a much larger scale.
So it wasn't something Pharaoh could just manage by, say, importing grain from Mesopotamia, because they were hit too.
Precisely. Everyone was hit. This brings us back full circle to Joseph's core message. God hath shewed Pharaoh what he is about to do. This is providence in action.
Meaning God didn't just know it was coming.
He didn't just know it, omniscience. He actively ordained it and was bringing it about, providence. This famine was an act of God, demonstrating his sovereignty over all nations and natural forces.
Wow. Okay, that context makes Joseph's role even more extraordinary. You've got this foreign prisoner basically outlining policy to a superpower, explaining an act of God that God himself is initiating.
It sounds almost absurd from a purely human perspective, doesn't it? But it perfectly illustrates that theme of God using the weak, the unexpected, the outsider to accomplish his purposes and display his strength.
Which leads to the ultimate question, why? Why orchestrate this massive global crisis, only to give Pharaoh, via Joseph, the key to surviving it? What was the bigger redemptive point?
That's the crucial connection. The sources strongly emphasize that the ultimate purpose was the preservation of God's chosen people, Jacob's family, the Israelites.
So the famine forces them to Egypt.
Exactly. God uses Joseph's whole painful journey, being sold into slavery, the imprisonment, his rise to power, and then this devastating famine, to bring his family safely to Egypt where they can survive and multiply.
Protecting the lineage.
Protecting the lineage through which the Messiah would eventually come. It's what Joseph himself realizes later in Genesis 50:20 when he tells his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today."
What an incredible arc, from Egyptian dream interpretation failures all the way to this vast 7-year crisis plan with global implications, all ultimately serving this specific redemptive goal.
It really covers so much ground: foresight, leadership, logistics, theology. And one final thing that really struck me from the sources.
Yeah.
Joseph's incredibly wise plan, the suggestion for the vizier, the store system, the officers, none of that was actually in the dream Pharaoh had.
Oh, right. The dream was the warning. The plan was Joseph's response.
Exactly. It was his own God-given wisdom and leadership ability applied practically to the revelation he received. God gave the warning. Joseph provided the wise action plan.
That's a powerful distinction.
It really is. And it leaves us with something important to think about, doesn't it? If God sometimes reveals what's coming, even if it's difficult or devastating, what does Joseph's example teach us about our responsibility?
Our responsibility to respond.
Yeah, to respond not just with prayer, but with wisdom, with practical planning, with action, with compassion.
Yeah.
Especially when we face crises we know are looming, whether they're personal, communal, or even global. How do we mirror that proactive wisdom Joseph showed back in Genesis 41?
That's definitely something to mull over. A
Yeah.
powerful place to end this deep dive.